Once again, we're back carving away at this giant. The hope is that eventually we can have a finished 28mm golden throne diorama. Maybe it'll even see a battle report or two, for those persistently asking. With the new Terminus Decree lore, that might come in the form of some Grey Knights versus Custodes, or maybe some Blood games. Well, we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves as we still have plenty more to do. In this video I'm going to show you guys what's been added since the last update, and some of the neat little details that now grace the throne room. Before we get stuck in, I needed to clear away all of the pieces from the diorama, and give the whole thing a good dusting with a brush. I'm not sure I've mentioned this before, but every few weeks I need to make sure the diorama is clean and dust-free. This is a relatively pain-free job, but just involves me spending a few minutes going around the project with a paintbrush, ensuring all the surfaces are tidy. Having any kind of dust linger while applying paint leaves a horrible texture and looks ugly, and I can tell you that for a fact, as I've learnt the hard way. What I can tell you is that if you're undertaking a large project, make sure you've done all your prep and that everything's clean and tidy. It will certainly save you some hassle. With the diorama successfully cleared, my attention was once again drawn to these vents. I'm really happy with how these have come out, all things considered, but want to lean a bit further into the grim darkness of the 41st millennium. As I've mentioned before, I like to imagine that this is where the ashes of our recently expended batteries, or psychers, collects. To convey this, I wanted to try using some pigments. I picked up a bottle of AK Interactive's Liquid Pigment Dust Effect. I've worked with pigment powders before, but not yet tried it in liquid format. Applying this was very satisfying, as if you use too much you can always come back in with mineral spirits, thin it down and wick away some of the excess. It also runs into all the cracks and crevices where you'd expect all the psycho dust to collect. Once you've applied the liquid pigment, you do have to wait a while for the magic to happen, but once it's fully dry it looks fantastic. I will add that I also went back over these vents with a very light dry brush of Abaddon Black to tone down the ash and finish them off. With that complete, it was time to add some more statues. Yes, more statues. I'm building the throne room, so there's going to be lots of them, and yes, this won't be the last time either. For a while I've had my eye on a couple of Gryph-hound statues from Age of Sigmar, and figured that with a bit of green stuffing and kit bashing, these would make great statues for the front of the diorama. Placing these either side of the causeway at the front of the build would make a good focal point, as well as tying in nicely to the overall theme of the project. Before I could do this, I needed to do a little bit of converting to make them blend in better. Once I had these assembled, I used a few layers of liquid green stuff to hide the writing on the base of the statues. I didn't want these to look too much like they were plucked from the realm of AOS, and thought that covering up the text would be a good start to making these look more 40k. Well, that and an Aquila on the front. Once this was done, I added a few Gribblies in the form of purity seals, because we all know you can't have too many of them, and then undercoated and airbrushed the miniatures. Whilst this is all happening, I'm trying to avoid looking over my shoulder at the shiny new box that has somehow ended up in my studio. At this point it was time to attack some of the other statues that are going to be lining the causeway up to the Golden Throne. In my last video I had an awesome suggestion about painting some of the statues up in a marble effect. Since then I've been pretty dead set on having that style, as I feel like it would look good on top of the gold pillars and bring that extra level of grandeur to the diorama. After some trial and a fair bit of error, I managed to produce a statue in a marble style that I was happy with. This formed the basis for how I would go about creating the next 5 of them. The method I ended up using is a pretty common one, which involves using dried wet wipes and tearing them. Once the wet wipe is sprayed with paint and then removed, it leaves a really nice marble effect. I have to state that when it comes to areas that aren't flat, this method isn't always foolproof. Though this method produces a fantastic effect on flat surfaces, it doesn't always translate to 3D, which has resulted in a few statues taking an alcohol bath. Here's what the 5 statues looked like by the end of the process. I still have the intention to come back to these and pick out the rest of the details such as weapons, and also give them a coat of glossy varnish to really sell that marble look. Moving on, it was time to focus on some of the plinths that these statues will stand on. For this, I decided to invest in some new kit in the form of a hardened Steenbeck Ultra Airbrush. I've got to make sure these plinths blend nicely, and the cheap airbrushes that I've been using for the past 2 years just won't cut it anymore. As a side note, for anyone considering getting this airbrush, I watched a really helpful video by The State of Play which goes through how to use your airbrush, how to disassemble it and put it back together. It really helped me get to grips with using it. Once these plinths were complete, they felt like they were missing something. Like they needed some kind of banner or decoration to really finish them off. Luckily enough, this is where Tom from Impatient Tabletop stepped in and sent me some fantastic banners and decals to use in the throne room. The regal design of these banners really helps to add another level of detail to this build. I wasted no time in getting these cut out and stuck to each pillar. I may have got a little bit too excited and stuck 3 to each pillar, which led me to run out pretty quickly. But Tom was kind enough to send me a few more to finish off the pillars. If you haven't heard of Impatient Tabletop, I suggest you go and take a look. They have a range of custom decals and banners, so if you're looking for something to make your miniatures stand out, then that's the place to go. I'll drop a link to their Instagram in the description for this video. Some of you might remember these little kit-bashed vents from our last video. I've been wanting to paint these up and add some details to them for the longest time, but I couldn't really decide on how I wanted them to look. Trawling through the internet a few weeks ago, I came across this out-of-production Forge World Metallica decal sheet for a reasonable price. This sheet has tons of tiny numbers and markings for each of my vents. After airbrushing, I started applying some decals to each of the vents. I catch myself occasionally questioning why I'm going so mad with the details, but then I realise it's not a race and I want to make sure that the diorama is the highest quality it can possibly be with me making it. At the moment I'm kind of considering this my magnum opus, so maybe when it's complete I'll just disappear from the hobby. I'll pick up something else like ice sculpturing, and maybe I'll make a giant diorama of the Golden Throne as an ice sculpture, yeah! Essentially, looking at it from the outside, you guys are all just watching a man's special interest get way out of hand. But, you know, if you're here for that, that's great. Back to the vents. Once completed, they're all more or less going to look like this example, which has a coat of oil wash and some liquid pigment too. Let's get all this stuff back on the board and see what we're looking at. I'm impressed with how much of an impact some of these details have made, and I definitely feel like having the banners on the pillars was the right move to make. I want the viewer to be able to take a closer look at the diorama and see details that they may not have noticed before whilst looking at the project as a whole. Over the coming weeks I'm going to strive to get these details finished and move on to another section of the build. The perfectionist monster in me is a hard thing to overcome sometimes, but I do think it's time for us to expand upon this build by getting another area painted. I also have a little side project up my sleeve that I'm looking forward to sharing with you guys, but there'll be more details about that in the near future. Thank you all very much for tuning in to another update. If you guys are enjoying the project, please consider liking, commenting and subscribing, as it helps my humble little channel get some more reach. If you want to check out Impatient Tabletop, then there's a link down below, as well as all of my social media and Patreon shenanigans. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.